Well guys, it's been quite a while since I've done a common problems video, and I've been talking about it for a while in some older videos. So, we've done the common problems on a lot of the GM trucks that are out there. And then we started rolling into the Duramaxes. So we've got a video on the LB7, the LLY. It's only right we make one for the LBZ. So let's go ahead and start that. So guys, I will preface this by saying whenever I bought my truck, and obviously this guy back here is an LB7 Duramax, but whenever I was looking to buy a Duramax, I did quite a bit of research trying to decide which of the classic Duramaxes I wanted to buy between the LB7, LLY, and LBZ to figure out, where I was going to get the most bang for my buck personally. So I will say that I personally think, and I think you'll see that reflected in a lot of the prices, that the LBZ is arguably the best Duramax that's out there due to the fact that it doesn't really have any emissions equipment on it. And for back in the day, the power at the time was pretty darn impressive. And they're still very popular today due to the fact of they're kind of the last model that you could get, at least in the GM family, with the least amount of emissions equipment. I'm talking about the EGR on it. Whereas whenever you moved into the next generation, you had the DPF. So anymore, they're fairly cheap. And I say that lightly. They're fairly cheap to increase the power on. They're pretty darn easy to work on. But I will say, if you want an LBZ, because of everything I've talked about here, you're going to pay the price for it. You guys go look on the marketplace. They can have a ton of miles and they're still worth, 5 figures, a lot of them. But anyways, just wanted to preface that by saying the LBZ is a great Duramax. I'm not knocking it or anything, but if you're going to buy one, here's some things that you potentially might run into and want to look at before buying one. All right, guys, so the first thing would be the transmission cooler lines. I've seen a lot of these trucks on forums, people saying that the transmission cooler lines leak. So that's something to be aware of. Check those out. Obviously, it's not a hard fix if you need to replace those, but something to be mindful of. You don't want to be leaking transmission fluid and running low on. The second thing being, like I talked about earlier, it does have a little bit of emissions equipment, which is the EGR, exhaust gas recirculator. Well, what that's doing is exactly as it sounds. It's taking some of your exhaust gas and reburning it through the engine to try to make it cleaner. Well, as you can imagine, that's not really great for your engine. Luckily, that's not a huge problem though, because you can block that off fairly easy, although the legality of it is questionable. It is something that's pretty darn easy to do, and there's lots of different kits out there that you can get for that. The next thing you're going to see, which is common across the spectrum of these trucks here, especially the classic Duramaxes, I'm talking about 01 through 07 classic, is the water pump. Just the way they were designed, they're prone to leak. You're eventually probably going to have to replace a water pump on these style trucks. And while you might think a water pump's not a huge deal, it's kind of a pain to replace on these trucks. We can make a different video about that some other time. Hopefully I never have to replace it on mine. But it is something to look out for. See if you're using any coolant. If you're dripping it out around down there where the water pump is, you probably got a leaking water pump. Let's move on to the next thing. And I had a really hard time making this video because, like I say, there's just not a lot of catastrophic failures that you have with these trucks, quite like you had with the LB7s and LLYs. And when I say catastrophic, I just mean expensive repairs. You just don't have these a whole lot. But one thing to be mindful of is that if you are buying an LBZ, a lot of the reasons that people are buying them are to turn them into hot rod trucks. And if you are going to be doing that, yeah, you can get some cheap power out of them. It's pretty easy. But one thing to be mindful of is that if you're going to, basically everything that I read is if you're going to try to hit over that 700 horsepower mark, you're probably going to crack some pistons. The pistons weren't quite as good on the LBZ as what they were on the LLY and LB7. So you see a lot of guys, if they really start getting into that range, they'll replace them from an older style truck. However, the rods are quite a bit better because that was kind of the weak point of these LB7s. But that is something to be mindful of if you're tuning it and going to try to push out a lot of power. You may run into some issues with the pistons. And guys, the last thing, which is common across all these early generation Duramaxes, is the Allison transmission. Now, whenever I say the Allison transmission, no, I don't mean anything bad about it. It's a great transmission if you're keeping the truck stock. I mean, in my opinion, it's probably the best of the diesel world between the three big brands. The only issue is, as soon as you start tuning these things very hot and pushing very much power out of them, the Allison transmission, as soon as it detects the slightest amount of slippage, it wants to limp itself. So if you start limping your transmission with some of those hot tunes, if you're wanting to push that amount of power, you're basically forced to have to rebuild and beef up that transmission. which, like I say, it's not really a problem, but it's something to be mindful of if that's the route you're wanting to go. And like I say, that's what a lot of these LBZ trucks, that's what a lot of people are looking to do, is build a lot of power out of them. So yeah, the transmission is great. The 6-speed's a lot better than the 5-speed, a lot of people will tell you. But if you're going to start tuning it very hot, just go ahead and budget for a transmission. All right, guys. Well, really about the LBZ engine, that's about all that I've got to say that's bad about it. They're a great truck if you're looking to buy one. If you got pockets deep enough for one, I think you're really going to like it. I personally just went with the LB7 because really the biggest issue with the LB7 is the injectors. Everybody makes fun of them for it. But if you can get some good sack injectors or something to put in there, you don't have to worry about it for a long, long time. And, you know, it's just a fine truck. But I understand why the LBZ is so popular. All right, guys, did I miss anything? If I did, leave it in the comments down below. Let's just kind of use this as an open forum for those guys out there that are thinking about maybe getting an LBZ, comparing it to some of the other generations of the Duramaxes, especially those classic LB7 and LLY trucks, to help them understand the pros and cons of each of them. Guys, thanks for checking out today's video, and stay tuned. If you like this sort of content, be sure to subscribe and come back, because we have been working on this LB7 Duramax, pushing a little more power out of it, doing some really fun things to it. I'd love to have you guys along for the ride. All right, guys, until next time, take care.